Let me join others to acknowledge the well laid out protocol. And let me just go straight to my paper. I had sent it earlier, so if it can be beamed, let it be beamed. I have been asked to speak on the topic beyond oil and gas, what next? And then to touch upon the plight of the oil producing communities. Nigeria, as we all know, has been plagued with this crude oil malady since the discovery. And it has, in some sense, shot our reasoning to the possibilities that exist for other sources of income to come. And so, oil and gas has resulted in what I will term socio-economic imbalance. In one hand, it has given us foreign earnings, but it has also created, on the other hand, a rental economy, which is the reason there's so much fight to control that resource. It has given us, especially in the past, the opportunities to create jobs, but it has come, in the case of the host communities, with severe health and environmental pollution. So I want to look at how a single export commodity that has given us such major source of foreign earnings and has made us so over-dependent to the point where we cannot think again. But thanks to the twin scourge of COVID and the collapse in oil prices, I think we're all back to base. And it is to do what we should do to get ourselves out of this quagmire that we're proffering some solutions. First of all, in starting to proffer the solution, we need to bust some myths. If you look at the first slide, it shows the contribution of oil, the oil sector, to Nigeria's GDP. And I looked at it from the fourth quarter of 2018 to the fourth quarter of 2020. You will discover that Nigeria's oil sector contributes just about 9% of our total GDP. So look at the myth. So non-oil sector actually contributes a lot more to our GDP. And yet we're all in that oil curse, killing ourselves, sharing poverty in the process. If we look at our trading partners, look at the United States. They used to be the largest importers of our crude oil. They stopped after a while. We still trade with them. Our total exports to the United States in 2019 was $2.82 billion. That's across all commodities. And out of that, non-crude oil exports made up 2.73 billion. That is 96, almost 97%. So again, where is this myth about oil? The same goes for the UK, where our total exports was 1.16 billion, out of which 98.3%, that's 1.4 billion, came from non-crude oil. So we begin to wonder then, why are we so ensconced in this crude oil debacle? The growth rate of our GDP compared to our population, and that is where the problem really lies. Even though there has been some modest growth, as recorded recently, compared to our population, which is growing at an average of 2.7%, the average growth rate has hobbled around 2.2 to 2.3, 2.4%. In other words, as our population grows faster than our rate of GDP growth, we're actually creating more and more poor people, almost as a deliberate state policy, creating poor people. Now, every day we tell ourselves that how do we get out of this? And the general agreement is that we should begin to look at how we can attract investments, foreign direct investments. But then, what are the factors that would enable you attract these investments? After a study of potential investors across multinational corporations, number one factor they considered as being important to them in taking an investment decision was political stability and security. Number two was legal and regulatory environment. Three, the large domestic market. Then macroeconomic stability and favorable exchange rate. It just goes down, 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 and all that. So by a mile, for anybody to come and consider investing in your environment, and really when I talk about investment here, I know we think generally about investment into Nigeria, but I'm also thinking about investment into the subnationals, because if we're going to get out of this stunted economic growth, we must begin to encourage the subnationals, that's the states, to themselves create the enabling environment for investments to come in. So we're not just looking at Nigeria as Nigeria, we're looking at every state. And every state, it is true for Nigeria that these factors are important in taking investment decisions, but it is also true for the component states. So states who think that they can hide forever under the federal and not do what they should do will be mistaken, because whether or not we like it, some of these solutions will be imposed on us. And those states that do not today work assiduously towards creating an enabling environment will be left behind. So let us look at political stability and security. There's somebody who's going to come talk to us about security. And I will look at the legal and regulatory environment. I have been a commercial law practitioner all my life, and have been involved in major transactions. And I can tell you from when I started, nearly 44 years ago, believe it or not, to what I see today, I've seen it all. I have seen the trajectory from when, if you all recall, the banking sector. Who remember the tally number days when we used to go to banks to, you remember, you are trying to go and get your own money from the bank. You have to leave home very early because it's a picnic. You have to leave very early, get to the bank, they give you a tally number. Then you now go and do other things. And then you come back towards closing time in the hope that you'll be called. And remember, those who are not called, it's a miserable day for them. And by the way, you're going to withdraw your money. It's not as if you're going to get a loan from the bank. But look at what banking has done today. What made that difference? Some wise leader, and we're talking about wise leader, decided that it didn't make sense for government to occupy that space. Free it up. They freed it up. And they brought the genius out of Nigerians. And today the banking sector contributes over so much, to the economic growth of Nigeria. And look at what our young bankers are doing all over the place. Most African economies today depend on the skills by Nigerian bankers. Doesn't it intrigue you that today you can, from the comfort of your bedroom, do as many transactions in banking locally and internationally? It has happened. Look at the high quality jobs that have come out of those things. Look at the complementary businesses that have come, and look at how it has unleashed the genius in Nigerians. From banking, I go to telecoms. Again, who remembers telecoms? Remember when you owned a phone in those days, the handset, it was simply an intention to get a line, because the big difference between the handset and getting a line. The whole of Nigeria had 700,000 installed lines, out of which only 400,000 were functional. And don't forget the fact that out of that 400,000, 200,000 would be for big men who would have 10 lines where most people do not have. Again, forward thinking. Somebody said, open up this space, get the private sector involved. And the legal and regulatory framework was then created. And what we see today, close to 160 million telephony penetration compared to 400,000. That begins to bungle your mind. When we have seen such very successful examples of what opening up the business space can do, why do we still argue about freeing up that one sector that has held all of us down? That's the oil and gas sector. The petroleum industries bill has been lying waste for nearly 20 years. 20 years to do something we know is good for us. But why is that so? It is clear that the power that comes from controlling that resource is what's driving the malady in this country. It is what is even driving and fueling political instability. Take it away, and you will see the huge difference. Whether it is population, whether it is distribution, whether it's so many things, we have lied about who we truly are simply to get an edge over the next person, because our economy has been built on sharing as opposed to building. The day you make the formula for sharing contribution to the center, we will know how many we truly are in this country. But that's not going to happen because those in charge of the system still want to skew it up. And that brings me straight to where we are today. You would have ordinarily thought that what I'm saying today, oh, the military drove it, because we're so quick to blame the military for everything. But the truth, and I can tell you that the truth, many of those major strides and decisions that were taken to free up this economy actually happened in the time of the military. And that was because the decision-making process was quick and sharp. If you met a military man who believed what you were saying and you told him this is what it would take to get it done, he will get it done. But what is happening today with our politics? Politics, ironically, you would have thought that democracy would have even accelerated the pace of development. The nostalgia that Governor Makinde was talking about just comes from the simple fact that this democracy is actually threatened by those who benefit from it, the politicians. Why have we caught ourselves in this quagmire where you do not even make laws that make for the good and peaceful existence of Nigerians? Everything, every fight is on sharing. Everything you hear today, geopolitical zone, Christian, Muslim, that when they go share, by the way, these things are not mentioned. When they go behind the curtain to share, they are not mentioned. But for the rest of the populace, we are kept busy, worrying and thinking that that is what matters. I want to submit to you today that democracy is not an end in itself. It must be seen as a means to an end. So we must change the face and the type of politics that we play. So there is nothing ready, easy way out for any one of you. Join the fray. Now, everything I have spoken to goes towards the ease of doing business. Because once you find the ease of doing business, once you get into that index, and this has been developed by the World Bank, that does development studies all over the world. And the index just tells you where you should be. So it gives you a target to look at. Today in Nigeria, we're not doing too well. In 2012, out of 190 countries surveyed, we were number 133. We started going worse, 138, 147, 170 in 2015, 2016, and 2017, 169. Through the efforts of what's going on today in the ease of doing business by the Vice President's office, we've started coming back down. And today we are at 131. 131 over 190 is a huge fail, but at least we still thank God. It was worse than 170. It would have been worse than this. But that gives us the target we should be looking at. And what does it take to do the ease of doing business? What? You create the environment. And one major thing, and I can speak at this point to my own constituency, the legal profession. Any businessman, any investor asks you two simple questions when they're coming in to invest. How do I get in? How do I get out? So it comes to your laws and to your legal and regulatory environment. If you mess with those ones, nobody's coming, for all the love in the world. And that is why we must go back and ensure that the rule of law takes center space in a democracy. You cannot talk about a democracy without the rule of law. And that is the importance. So our legislators must understand that when you set laws, it is not because you want to hit at somebody. It should be for the good of everyone. So how do you diversify the economy if you do not open the space? I want to also let you know, we as in my office was directly involved with setting up the telecoms, what is today the Telecoms Act. And we had one big hurdle when we were doing the draft. And that was who would start allocating frequencies, licenses, spectrums. It was big. Because under the old NITEL, it was the minister. And if you all remember, in those days, the Minister of Communication was just as powerful as the Minister of Oil. But we pushed through a legislative reform that removed the power from the minister to the regulator. And it is not an accident today that the NCC regulates the sector and investments are coming in droves. There's a direct linkage. That's the same thing that should happen with the Petroleum Industries Bill. There's no magic to it. Open the space up and see how the investments will come in. Billions will come in, billions will go out. That is how investments work. There are no sentiments. Investment funds look to go to where they're most welcome. So there is no need begging people to come and invest in your territory. Do what you need to do, and if people will beg you, can I come and invest in your territory? That's what we need to do. I don't want to take too much of your time because there's nothing I'm saying here that is totally strange. But it's just that today affords us the opportunity to go back and look at ourselves again as we set to move forward. Still on my constituency and our legislators, you all have been present in the JUSUN with the JUSUN strike. What was it predicated upon? The judiciary is fighting to free itself. Isn't it an irony that the judiciary in a democratic setting has to fight to free itself up from the shackles of the executive branch of government? And what is happening today, you can see it. If you do court work, let me give you the order, the priority order when your judges sit. 1, it's political cases. 2, criminal cases. 3, civil cases. So when it takes you, I'm sure you all listened to the last interview by our president. He said when it takes you 5 years, 6 years, 10 years to decide on a matter, who will come? So that is an indictment, and that is my constituency. I'm not running away from it. So we too must begin to do what we need to do, because it is impacting even on the quality of our judges. When last did you read about a very well-reasoned judgment? Everything is done on interlocutory motions. Everything is done on some technicality or the other. You were all there when they asked our CJ and during his Senate hearings, would you be dependent on technicality for whatever? That question was asked out of anguish, because it is sad that you never get to the meat of a matter in court in any reasonable time. The first 2-3 years can go on service. Did you serve me? Did you not serve me? In an era where today everything we do is on the internet and can be go online. Why? My Lord have not been served. Oh, council, registrar, was it? They spend that. They come out in their wig and gown looking great, and you think they're doing justice to the economy. It's not happening that way. We must change it. We must go to the virtual arena. COVID has told us and has taught us that many of the things we thought could not be done can be done. We can retool, we can re-equip and prepare our judiciary to play the role that will support any investment effort we make. Because if an investor does not think he can get justice from your territory, he's not going to come on. So we begin to look at other ways of diversifying the economy. By the way, a few days ago, I read that Saudi Arabia has officially renounced that they are an oil-producing country. They say we are not an oil-producing country anymore. Does that send a message to every one of us? Saudi Arabia. What they're doing now, they're going into alternative sources of fuel because they know that's where the world is going to. Today, if you're in the fossil fuel business, you're going to sweat for funding. If you want to go into renewables, you may have a story. So if Saudi is doing that, who are we to still be talking about what on the PIB should be passed? Who are we to still give ourselves so much grief over a commodity, which if we properly utilize, can be the catalyst of growth for all other commodities? Look at our gas. Look at our gas. If we don't liquefy to export it, we flare it to the detriment of the people around. This gas flare regulation should be passed. We don't even have gas for power. And yet you cannot remove the importance of electricity in the diversification of this economy. Every day you're entertained to load shedding. I'm sure you all now know the language. Disco, Genco, load shedding. You know all the language today, which is good, by the way. The reason you know is because the sector has been opened up. Before, it was like a cult. But why is that? We do not have enough gas to fire most of the generating plants because 70% of our electricity comes from thermal plants. And the feedstock for thermal plants is gas. Doesn't it bother you? For a country that has oil and gas is in unquantifiable numbers, do not have enough gas to power. That should keep us thinking. So happily, I will tell you, Nigeria beyond oil and gas. Nigeria beyond oil and gas has power as one of its central themes. And I know we've been involved, thankfully, under the auspices of the central bank, the Minister of Power, the Minister of Finance, in rejigging the entire power sector. And we're trying to create that alignment that starts from gas to generation to transmission to distribution. Once we get it right, and we will very soon, the story will change. Because if telephones, if banking can create the sort of difference they've made to the economy, just think about what power will do. Ideally, the revolution in the power sector should have come before banking and telecoms. Because anybody will tell you that the banks, most of these banks and telecoms companies, they spend over 40% of their income on self-generation. You sitting here, you all own generators. You should not. You should be thinking peacefully about how to use your brains for other things than to ask whether diesel has finished, clocking time, switch that off and switch that on. So as we go on, I want to conclude by saying that Nigeria's future beyond oil and gas is attainable. And I know there's been so many depressing talks around the politics, but please, nothing comes without a price. Every country in this world went through the stages that we went to, so we should stop feeling sorry for ourselves. If you look at the ancient history of Europe, if you're a historian, you look at the UK, you remember the Vikings, they slaughtered themselves. They did the sort of things we are seeing today. There was no reason for them not to lose hope. The prayer is always that God should raise a few good men, because it always takes a few good men to bring about change. God in his wisdom has never allowed the annihilation of his people. When we go through challenges, we should look up to him. If you do not love your brother, if you do not start at home to love your brother, I don't know how you can do it nationally. So at times we pretend that it is when this country breaks up that you will do better. That's a big lie. Because by the time we break up to our component parts, we will even know in our family unit whether we are from the same mother or from the same father. So at times, this size enables us to do what we should do. And please, many of you here, you're too comfortable back home. Travel out. 2018, I was chairman of the Conference Planning Committee of the Nigerian Bar Association. And I went with my then president, A.B. Mahmoud, to the Northeast. And I know many of my friends almost had a fit. We went there. We were hosted by the governor. We actually met them in executive council, whatever. They prayed, started with a Muslim prayer. And to my shock, he asked me, George, please, can you give us the closing prayers? And I prayed. I'm a Christian, a proud Christian. And I prayed. That sent a lot of message. If I was far, 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 far away, I would think I was going into the lion's den. We really need to rethink how we think about this country. It's important. Not only that, when we were discussing the Boko Haram scourge, he told me something that was so true. He said, George, is economic. Over the years, young people have been laid to waste. And he has resolved that education is the way out. He said he did his youth service in Calabar, and he saw that the secret of the South was education. And he took us on a tour. We went on a tour to schools that they were doing there. We all need to encourage ourselves, because we've abandoned education. And good education, let me follow my good bishop, good education for that matter. Because it's education not just for book, but for values in society. Civics should return. History should return. We must begin to understand one another, accommodate one another. We cannot live in isolation. Security, my good friend here will talk about it. And then, as I've said, generally, what we must all do, as they say, is keep working, keep hoping, keep striving. God never, never abandons his own. And God will never abandon this great country called Nigeria. Thank you very much.